This is Horror Scary Stories channel. Some stories are too real, too terrifying to forget. They stay with you, haunting your thoughts and your dreams. Tonight, you will hear one of those stories. A true, disturbing tale that Eliza wishes she could forget. But once you listen, it will be with you, too, forever. Eliza had always been a believer in the supernatural, but she never thought she would experience something so chilling herself. It was the summer of 1999, and she had just moved into a new apartment in a quiet town. The building was old, with creaky floors and peeling wallpaper, but it was affordable. Eliza was excited to start her new life there. On her first night, Eliza noticed something strange. The air in the apartment felt heavy, almost as if someone was watching her. She brushed it off as her imagination and went to bed. But that night, she woke up to the sound of soft crying. It was faint, but it was coming from inside her apartment. Eliza sat up in bed, her heart racing. She listened carefully. The crying stopped. She thought maybe it was coming from a neighbor, but something about it didn't feel right. The next morning, she asked around, but none of her neighbors had children, and no one had heard any crying. The following nights, the crying continued. Every night at the same time, around 2 a.m., the soft weeping would fill her apartment. It seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. Eliza's sleep was disturbed, and she started to feel anxious being alone in her own home. One night, she decided to stay up and try to figure out where the sound was coming from. She sat on her couch, the lights dimmed, waiting for the clock to strike 2 a.m. When the time came, the crying started again, but this time, it was louder, closer. Eliza followed the sound, her hands shaking. It led her to the closet in her bedroom. She slowly opened the door, expecting to see nothing, but inside, she found an old, dusty box. She had never noticed it before. Curious, she opened the box. Inside, she found an old doll. It was worn and dirty, with cracks on its face and eyes that seemed to follow her every move. A shiver ran down her spine. Suddenly, the crying stopped. The apartment was completely silent, and Eliza could feel a cold breeze, even though the windows were shut. She closed the box and decided to throw it away the next day. But as she lay in bed that night, she felt something strange. The bed shifted as if someone had sat down on the edge. Slowly, Eliza turned her head, and there, at the foot of her bed, sat the doll, its cracked face smiling at her. She screamed, leaping out of bed. The doll fell to the floor, but when she picked it up, it was ice cold, colder than anything she had ever felt. In a panic, Eliza grabbed the doll and threw it into the dumpster outside her building. She hoped that would be the end of it, but that night, the crying was louder than ever. It filled her apartment, echoing off the walls. Eliza tried to cover her ears, but it was no use. The sound was inside her head. The next morning, she checked the dumpster, but the doll was gone. She was sure she had thrown it out, but it had disappeared. Desperate, she called a friend, Tom, for help. Tom came over and stayed the night to see if he could hear the crying too. At 2 a.m., the crying began. Tom's face turned pale as he realized Eliza wasn't imagining things. He followed the sound, leading him to the same closet where Eliza had found the doll. But this time, when he opened the closet, the doll was sitting there, grinning up at him. Tom grabbed the doll and threw it out again, but the crying only grew worse. They could hear whispers now, soft voices calling their names, coming from the walls. Eliza felt her sanity slipping away. In the days that followed, things got worse. Eliza started seeing shadows move out of the corner of her eye. Objects in her apartment would be in different places, even though she was the only one there. One night, she woke up to find the doll sitting on her chest, its cracked face only inches from hers. Terrified, she moved out of the apartment, leaving everything behind. But the crying followed her. Even in her new place, late at night, she could still hear the soft weeping, and sometimes, she could feel the bed shift as if someone was sitting beside her. Eliza still hears the crying sometimes. She tries to ignore it, but she knows it will never stop. She will never escape the doll and the voices. It's a part of her now, and once you've heard it, you can never unhear it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more stories like this. Submit your story. Do you have a horrifying experience? To submit it to gmail.com for a chance to be featured in an upcoming